Hello, my name is Sheehan. Today I'd like to talk about Schumann's first symphony in B-flat major, nicknamed the Spring Symphony. And I'd like to go through each of the four movements, exploring how the music's put together, because I do believe that having some understanding of musical structure can greatly aid our appreciation and enjoyment of classical music. Schumann composed this, his first completed orchestral work, in a few days of white-hot inspiration in January of 1841. He completely sketched the symphony out in 4 days, and by the end of February the orchestration was completed. In March it was premiered with no less a musical figure as Felix Mendelssohn conducting the premiere, and it was warmly received. Now, prior to 1841, of course, Schumann was known predominantly for his solo piano compositions. Those string of masterpieces such as Kindersehn and Carnival, etc. And then in 1840 married Clara Wieck, and of course there was that great outpouring of song from Schumann as well. So why the switch to orchestral music? Well, Clara is probably behind this. She was trying to encourage her husband so that the more of the public could recognise his genius. So she was instrumental in encouraging Robert to explore more weightier forms through orchestral music. Thus the first symphony, and indeed the other symphonies, the piano concerto, etc. So the 1840s are a bit of a sea change in Schumann's compositional output. The Spring Symphony is aptly titled. The work is full of energy, of high spirits, of light, of kind of a joyous abandon about some of the music. Indeed, spring is the root of the very conception of the symphony. The opening bars of the first movement, introduction, are said to be inspired, really a setting of some words by Adolf Bürtger, the German poet, one of his spring ballads, which goes like this. O wende, wende deinen Lauf, im Tale blüht der Frühling auf. Oh turn and change your course, now in the valley blooms the spring. So this idea of new life, of this wonderful season of rebirth, is very much at the core of this music. Indeed, Schumann originally wanted to give a title to each of the movements, suggesting spring, but he eventually discarded those titles. The symphony's in 4 movements. The first movement, as you'd expect, is in a roughly standard sonata form with a lengthy introduction. We just heard a bit of the introduction, but I'll play it again. The orchestra here sounds like some mighty organ here. Is a proclamation of this glorious new season. This introduction is quite varied in tone actually. We have some more darker turns in the music, but eventually it settles down to this rather pastoral sense in the texture, these triplets bubbling along, before we reach the first subject, which is based on that introductory dotted idea, but quicker. This is the first subject. And so on. It's a really joyous idea, full of life and energy. No sooner as that's stated, we have a transition based on that idea, which takes us to the second subject. The second subject is gentler, in a minor mode, heard first of all in the clarinets, like this. Goes like that, a lot gentler. Eventually that settles down to the dominant key, which is F major, of course, for this rather boisterous Codetta based on ascending scales. Then the exposition is repeated. The development is almost exclusively based on that dotted idea from the first subject. Passed around like that. It's quite thrilling. We then go up a sequence and we have this, my favourite bit actually, one of my favourite bits of the whole symphony. We have this dotted idea in the bass, but we have this new melody on the oboe. It's a wonderfully expressive moment. So I love that moment, it's so wonderful. Also listen out for the triangles in the development. Such a wonderful addition to the orchestral texture. Really great orchestration. The development climaxes as a return to the introductory bars. Just kind of hauling back to the beginning of the symphony. It's a really powerful moment, a great way of finishing the development. Then we have the recapitulation. Schumann ditches the first subject. We've heard it so much in the development. We don't need to hear it again. He jumps straight into the transition. We have the second subject. Then we have the coda. Now the coda is quite interesting. It begins with this energy, this sheer energy based on that dotted idea. But then we have a new idea which we haven't heard before. It's kind of like a hymn to nature, a hymn to spring perhaps. Rather lovely moment at the end of this movement, and then the coda finishes in a rather rousing way. In this coda there's also a flute scale, rises right up just before that hymn. It reminds me of the Pastoral Symphony by Beethoven, kind of that similar idea of nature. The second movement, as you'd expect, the slow movement, is different in tone from the first movement. Very beautiful melody forms the backbone of this movement. The movement's in a monothematic sonata form, which is to say that there's really just one melody, but the melody is repeated in the dominant before the development. The melody goes like this. It could be something from one of Schumann's songs. So on, a really lovely long-limbed melody. We have a transition which takes us to the second subject group, which, as I've said, is the first subject melody but in a different key. This time in the cellos with this kind of off beat configuration in the woodwinds. And then there's a development. The development is quite interesting because it kind of has a prefiguring of Brahms's third symphony. I wonder if Brahms, when he was writing that, was thinking of this moment, this movement. We have this. Which of course is that motto idea from Brahms's third symphony. An interesting kind of pre-echo of that. We come back to the first subject, the second subject in a recapitulation. There's no need for the second subject because it is the same melody as the first subject in the recapitulation. We have a coda and then a transition to the scherzo. The scherzo is interesting because instead of having one trio, there's two trios. So the form is A, B, A, C, A. And the main scherzo melody always reminds me of Mozart's 40th Symphony, the minuet there. It goes in the minor mode, it goes like this. So that melody keeps coming back. The first trio is these rather, this dialogue between strings and wind based on kind of these chords. And so on, kind of pass back and forth. We go back to the scherzo idea. The second trio is this rather Beethoven, ferocious rising scales. Bum, 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 bum. Again, a real contrast to the scherzo in tonality. We go then to the coda. The finale is a gloriously upbeat movement to end this wonderful symphony. We have a few bars of introduction, which is actually a foretaste of what will become the second subject. Then we have this charming first subject idea. And that's heard restated throughout the orchestra. We have a transition, which I think we hear on the woodwind first. Which eventually takes us to this chorale-like idea, which again Brahms perhaps took upon some of his music. You might think of the Academic Festival Overture, those rather student song sounding melodies. The second subject goes like this. Which we've heard in the introduction already. We have a Codetta and the Exposition's repeated. We have the second time round a brief transition passage which takes us to the development, in which we hear some more kind of echoes of Beethoven's Sixth. We hear this flute kind of imitating a spring bird. We have the Recapitulation, the first, second subjects, the Codetta. And then we have this Coda, which kind of emphatically spells out a B-flat major triad right at the end. The Spring Symphony is something of a change for Schumann. In his compositional emphasis has shifted from more kind of intimate forms into the grander symphonic scale. It's a really wonderful work. It is a new, full of energy and this freshness and this beauty and this sheer joy of life and creation. If you're familiar with it, please have a listen and follow the structure as you listen. I'll put the bar numbers or measure numbers below in the description. Thank you for watching. If you have any further suggestions for any other pieces you'd like me to talk about, please put them in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe, and happy Christmas. Thank you. Bye-bye.